All right. Good evening and welcome. My name is Jessica Levito, and I will be what I'm going to call the facilitator this evening, a little less than the moderator. My goal for the evening is really to facilitate a discussion on equity in honesty in education. I'm going to ask folks to be muted.
I don't care. Well, if you don't turn it on, we're going to miss it. It's on.
Could everybody please mute? I need a co-host. I need a co-host that knows how to operate the machinery.
Jessica, I can help you.
Thank you. So how do I make you the co-host? Where?
If you go over to participants and then you
Uh-huh.
find my name, click on the more button all the way over to the right.
There we are. There we are. There we are. Yeah, I actually am surprised. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so Liz, are you out there? Would you like to introduce yourself and welcome from the NAACP? I saw that she was in and out a few times, so there. Nope, I see her.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to, my name is Liz Penna. I'm the current president of the Ashtabula branch of the NAACP. I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to being here tonight. And I want to thank our distinguished panel for being there. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you. And I'm going to go on unless Mary, Mary, would you like to welcome from the league?
Yes, I'm Mary Howe. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Ashtabula County. And we're doing this tonight in cooperation with the NAACP of Ashtabula County also. So again, I'm thankful to the panelists, and I'm especially thankful to Jessica for setting this up and doing all of this for us. So thank you. And thank you for all of you that have joined us.
Fantastic. And I'm sorry if you can hear my cat crying. We're just going to add a layer of authenticity to the evening. So without further ado, I am going to introduce, well, actually, I'd like to talk about the format just very briefly. Tonight, what my goal for the evening is to facilitate a discussion and a dialogue amongst our esteemed panelists. We're going to have the discussion and then leave it open for questions towards the end. So questions will come most likely the last 20 to 25 minutes of the evening. I do have a series of questions, so this won't be a presentation per se. Well, what this will be is more of a discussion. Each participant has seen some of the questions before to give them an opportunity, and a few of the questions will have them as leaders on that. So without too much more of my rambling, I'd like to introduce our guests. So Dr. NJ Akbar moved to Akron in 2009 from Detroit, Michigan, and has engaged with Akron Public Schools since that time. Dr. Akbar struggled in school early on and was in special education classes, but by the time he reached high school, he was placed in honors classes. Dr. Akbar is employed at Kent State University as the Associate Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Dr. Akbar received his PhD in Cultural Foundations of Education from Kent State University. His research and focus areas include parent engagement, educational policy, educational sociology, and Black male student success. Dr. Akbar has received many awards for his passion and commitment to education. Some of those awards include the Significant African American Male in Akron in 2017, the Harold K. Stubbs Humanitarian and Education Award in 2016, and the Greater Akron Chambers 30 for the Future Award in 2015. Ms. RoLesia Holman is the veteran educator, director of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the Ashtabula area city schools, and the first African-American female elected to Ashtabula City Council. She earned a bachelor's of science in education from the University of Maryland, a master's degree in educational policy and leadership from the Ohio State University, and a master's in education from the Harvard Graduate School of Education in Technology, Innovation, and Education. She's well-grounded in public education, gained from over a decade in K through 16 classroom teaching positions in the United States and abroad. Since 2005, she has varied experiences as a proprietor of Sojourner Education Services, designing and facilitating seminars on equity-based professional learning communities, facilitating professional development, and coaching for school leaders, teachers, parents, and nonprofit organizations. Merle Johnson is a retired teacher with 40 years of teaching experience in the Cleveland Public Schools. A graduate of Glenville High School in the Cleveland District, she received her Bachelor of Arts degree from Kent State University and her Master of Education degree from Cleveland State University. She was elected to the State Board of Education in 2016. During her years teaching, Ms. Johnson helped new and struggling teachers improve their skills through educational research and dissemination program developed by the American Federation of Teachers. She also developed and conducted workshops on cultural competency and trauma-informed education to empower teachers to successfully teach all of their students. Ms. Johnson was a member of the North Shore AFL-CIO Executive Board for many years, up until the time when she was elected to the state board. Ms. Johnson is an avid student advocate, and during her years as a teacher, she helped students develop leadership skills by training them in mediation through the Winning Against Violent Environments, the WAVE program, voter registration, letter writing to newspapers, and speaking at community forums. She also transported student council leaders to Columbus to lobby for fair school funding. Since her retirement, Ms. Johnson has taught student participants in the Upward Bound program every summer on the campus of Case Western University. Case's campus is also where she hosts a weekly radio show called It's About Justice. And we're actually going to start the evening with a question for Merle. Merle, in the wake of the George Floyd, well, first off, is everybody okay? We all situated? I have been looking down, reading, and I feel like I've lost my participants because of the view that I have. So there we go. In the wake of the George Floyd murder by police in 2020, the Ohio State Board of Education passed Resolution 20, condemning racism. Can you tell us about the resolution and what has happened to that resolution since?
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for the invitation to be here. This is a very important program, and I love being a part of it. Let me just make sure everybody understands the State Board of Education has 11 members who are elected and 8 members are appointed by the governor. And our role basically is to operationalize laws that come from the General Assembly. That's basically what we do. I mentioned that because it's important to know that in response to the murder of George Floyd in May of 2020, one of our board members stood up and said that we need to do something about it. We needed to do some self-reflection. We just need to look at equity. We needed to do something in response to that. And so 4 of us, 2 of the members are no longer on the board, but one other member, President Laura Kohler, the 4 of us put together a resolution. And I want to give you the complete name because I think that's very important. It was a resolution to condemn racism and to advance equity and opportunity for Black students, Indigenous students, and students of color. And basically that resolution, it talked about the disparities that exist in the state of Ohio, which caused children of color not to be as successful as they deserve to be. So within that resolution, we mentioned things like culturally responsive curriculum. We talked about the amount of Black males, preschool Black males, and how more Black males in preschool are suspended and expelled than white students. We talked about white supremacy. We condemned white supremacy in that resolution. And our resolves, we said that we wanted to see implicit bias training done for all the staff of ODE and also for our members. And then we strongly recommended, because of local control, we can't make anybody do anything. But we strongly recommended that districts begin a reflection and internal examination of their own, involving all members of their school community to examine all facets of the school's operations, with a special emphasis on curriculum, hiring practices, staff development practices, student discipline, and so forth. And so that resolution, we were having a Zoom meeting at that time, and we worked until 11 o'clock at night to get it passed. And it passed 12-5 with 1 abstention. What's important for you to know is that it was the appointed members that helped us pass that resolution. And so in September, October, we have a period of public participation, and we started getting some real racist comments made as people came in, because we became a target for the folks who did not believe that children of color should have the success that they deserve. And so in 2020, we got new members, and we had a member who was elected who decided that he wanted to rescind that resolution. And so he put together a resolution that would rescind the anti-racism resolution. What I want the listeners to know is that those 8 appointed members were literally threatened by 2 senators, along with the governor, that if they voted to rescind, if they didn't vote to rescind the resolution, they would be kicked off the board. I call it a mobster mentality. You know, they didn't have a horse head in their bed, but as far as I was concerned, it's the same thing. And so we voted to rescind on October 13th. The vote was 10-7. And there were 2 appointed members who did not vote to rescind. One was our president, Laura Kohler. I apologize for the noise in the background. And the other one was Eric Hockler. And Eric kept asking during the meeting, what's wrong with the resolution? He kept asking that, what's wrong with the resolution? And nobody could answer it. And so as a result of Laura and Eric not voting to rescind, they received a call from the governor's staff and were asked to resign. And so our president, Laura Kohler, was kicked off the board along with Eric Hockler. And what I said at the end of that meeting was that the work will continue. I said, this recension will not stop anything. I will continue to do the work, and we have districts that are already doing the equity work that needs to happen. And so that's the story of the resolution.
Ms. Meryl, would you mind sharing what was the sentiment of those who did not want that resolution passed? And those who wanted to rescind it?
First of all, they deny the existence of systemic racism. They say it doesn't exist. And so since they don't believe that systemic racism exists, they don't consider racism as a reason why children of color don't succeed. And they actually feel that if you do anything special, and I'm making quotes in the air here, special to help children of color, they consider that racist, that you're treating a group different than another group. So they, and you know, I can't really get inside their heads as to what they were thinking, but these are the kinds of things that were expressed.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
If I could add, one, I applaud Meryl's advocacy on the state school board, and we really need more members like her on our state school board. And I could tell you my personal opinions about a few of them, but I'm going to leave that out of here. But one of the things I want to say is it was very good. Like I was a little jubilated to see that the state school board took that step in July of 2020. Because I never thought in a million years that our state school board would even make a statement about racial equity or racism, that it exists. So I just want to take one moment to at least highlight the fact that they did do that, which was something I thought in a million years wouldn't happen, knowing who's on our board or who was on our board at that time. I actually have much higher respect and admiration for those members who are no longer there. The last thing I wanted to say is our school board specifically, I'm president of the Akron School Board. We passed a very similar, very directive resolution in June of 2020. And in October, when after the rescission, we passed a resolution condemning the state school board for their rescission in favor of a new resolution, which was basically a condemnation statement, which is not strong enough. It does not acknowledge that there was past or historic and present harms happening, and that there's some things that we need to do actively to to as a system to remove barriers that we put in place that are caused by racism. So I just want to say that, and just always lift Sister Johnson up for the work that she does.
Thank you.
Thank you. And this is to whoever wants to field the question first. What is honesty in education, and what does it mean to you?
Jessica, before we move to
Sure,
that
jump.
question. I
Sure,
just
sure,
wanna-
sure.
Yeah, to Miss Johnson. I have a colleague in Chicago who works for the city with similar position, DEI. And they mentioned to me that there is a national organization called GARE, Government Alliance for Racial Equity. And I've since reached out to them for additional information because they help municipalities really think systemically about the issue, gather data, and walk them through a series of steps that will help mitigate the effects of racism nationwide. So I just want to put that out to folks who are on councils, city councils, or you work in some capacity with the government, that GARE, the Government Alliance for Racial Equity, is a wonderful organization to partner with, or at the very least explore and see what tools and things they have accessible to folks who want to become members.
Thank you.
Sure.
And I
Jess-
will do my best. I'll do my best to curate some of these resources as well. So some of the links that Cynthia she's on it, and I love it. When I'm not facilitating, I tend to be the link dropper. So I'm really glad that she's here tonight.
Cynthia's
But
good at that.
yeah, I love it. But what I'll do is this video is going to be posted on our YouTube page. I'm going to actually post these links. So as these links come up and these resources, RoLesia, I'll make sure that I get that link as well. We'll add that to so folks can follow up if they would like. So I will then bounce that question about honesty in education back to the panel.
Yeah, so
we
I'll start just generally. To me, when I just think about the terms, it's about being truthful about our past and our present acts throughout our country, throughout the world, and acts and behaviors that inform our current reality, and getting those truths from multiple perspectives. So I just think about, hey, are we telling the truth for those folks who have lived through whatever experiences that have historically happened, and are we listening to them, and are we valuing them and honoring them for the truth that they are? That's just a broad general. That's not a scholarly or academic definition, just broadly in my mind. That's what I think about in honesty in education.
When I think of honesty in education, I think about teachers who may not know all that they need to know to be honest with their students, but they know that. So they go out of their way to get the kinds of information that they need to be authentic and to be honest with their students. So often, sometimes people think they're insecure because they don't feel like they know enough. So to me, honesty in education means that you care enough to take the time to find out what you need to know, to make sure that you are giving your young people, your students, the truth about America's history.
And everything that Ms. Holman and Johnson stated, I just want to say that my thought about honesty in education is about honoring and respecting individuals and their lived experiences, and also understanding the truth that we live in is that truth, fact, and history is told by victors. And there are some things that we generally accept as fact or truth that is not truth or fact. They are just generally accepted based off what's been socially programmed to us to be truth or fact. And that's a whole different discussion, but I do want to say that that is a part of this. As we think about honesty in education, it's valuing individuals' differing perspectives of the same event. and also having a place and space for those conversations to happen. And that is what honesty in education is. It's giving individuals, students, the right to be empowered to listen and learn from multiple perspectives and to gain their own judgment based off those facts that are presented or perspectives presented.
Something Ms. Johnson said about teachers who don't know the history, but are they open and willing or even beg the questions like, well, what am I missing about this history? What is it that my students know or my families know? Dr. Akbar, you may know of Dr. Karen Mapp's work about accessing families and funds of knowledge. Do we open ourselves up to community who have differing truths than ours and bring them into the classroom? Can we use them as curriculum, right, to help teach our students to explore multiple perspectives about what happened in the world? So I think there's a level of humility teachers
Definitely.
and with that humility, an inquiry stance to be open to asking the questions and inviting, appreciating and valuing what our students bring as strengths and assets, again, as curriculum into our classrooms.
Yeah, during the time that I was creating the culturally competent workshops, one of the things that I reminded teachers is that we were the strangers. You know, we're the strangers in the classroom. And we have to, I like the use of the word humility. We have to be humble enough to realize that. I was in a workshop and the gentleman said that we are a passenger on their journey. And so we have to be willing to accept that and do what we can to make sure that we are approaching them in that way, not as a know-it-all, but someone who wants to learn from our students and from their community and from their families.
Wonderful, thank you. So, and this, what you were talking about kind of leads to some of this, and I love that you're centering the students in their journey, and we're going along for it. What is the value of teaching and discussing controversial current events in the classroom? And since I'm looking at you, Meryl, I'm gonna let you go first, and then we'll share that question.
When you say the value, it's the student's reality. You know, it's current events is their reality. And so it's important to be able to help them deal with whatever that reality may be. One of the things that I'm hesitating here because one of the things that the law that I'm concerned about, House Bill 322 and 327, one of the things I'm concerned about is that it says that teachers may not deal with current events. And that's one of the main ways that young people find out what their reality is. And so I think it's very important for current events to be a part of the curriculum. When I was teaching, that was before the internet became popular, but one of the things that my students had to do for homework is they had to do the who, what, where, the who, what, when, where, and why of news stories. And they got so excited about it because, you know, they would share these stories in the classroom and they would learn so much about what was going on, something that they would learn from each other. And I just really feel that I made that a regular part of my curriculum. And I just think current events are very, very important because our young people need to be able to face reality, whatever is happening, be it bad or good. They need to be able to do that with their educator because so often they're not able to talk to their families about it.
I have a question about your question, Dr. Levito. You talk about controversial issues. What is considered controversial?
Yeah, I didn't even cover that part.
and then who decides it's controversial?
Yeah, I don't think we can make that determination, can we? Because controversial would be
all over that. I mean, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, because somebody has to define it as controversial, and what is controversial to me and even my institution may be different than what is controversial for another institution. And what's controversial for one grade may not be controversial for another grade. And so we have that kind of, so yeah, I'd love to hear what you think about that.
Well, I don't have the answer, but I have lots of questions, because it makes me wonder if folks would think to the resolution that Ms. Johnson talked about, resolution 20, if watching what happened to George Floyd, would that be controversial? It's truth, it's fact, it happened. So are you saying that we can't discuss real life events? What is controversial?
That's a great
Well, since
question.
no one else is gonna say it, I'll say it. I mean, controversial in what we're talking about is what dominant society, what those in power deem not appropriate to be discussed or harms their right to maintain power and control the narrative. That's controversial. Anything that is teaching, people to think critically and to question what we know is fact and what we know to be what we accept. And any questioning of that is deemed controversial. I mean, everything that I do pretty much in my life, people consider controversial, but what it is it's centering those who are marginalized. It's centering those voices and experiences of individuals who are typically underserved, underrepresented, and stepped on in order for people to step up. And so my my life's work is to make people uncomfortable and to live in that controversy, because if I don't, then their voices continue to be stumped on, and minimized. And that's really what we need to be working on, elevating those voices and those experiences and perspectives that have long lived on the periphery and put them right in the center of the conversation, right in the center of the table, and let the controversy begin, because you're always going to have controversy if that's what you stand for.
I so agree with you 100%. And my fear, my concern is that to whoever is deemed to the decider of controversy is allowed to enact that, it takes us back to a level of erasure. It erases our history and our truth. And we've already been erased from our perspective throughout history in the books and the text. So is this just another attempt to set us back? And if not, then what is it?
It's another attempt to set us back. That's what it is. And imagine what teachers are feeling. If we're saying, who decides controversial, then imagine what teachers are feeling. They're walking on eggshells because they have no idea what steps they can take. And it's just tragic what's being done to erase what's going on and what should be happening in our classrooms.
I'm going to ask more of a question that's not here for a minute. That's what is the danger in that, and what is happening right now in Ukraine and Russia? And when we can look at what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, and we can see how scary it is to limit what people can learn, right? They don't. So when we look at nationalism and how scary it is to teach just one perspective, how can we, I guess, really amplify the danger, identify the danger by looking at how it's affected other countries now? I guess this is talking about current events also, but maybe we need to do that. So I'm just wondering how we can communicate this to some folks that may be thinking that we're pushing too hard, too fast.
I think that's where we need to hear from our students. I started a group of students. They named themselves Speak, students promoting equity and knowledge. And there's 13 students. I asked my colleagues to send me some students who were passionate about these bills. And so I had them write some letters to the editor. And in response to your question, I marked off a few sentences from their letters, because I think when you talk about what's the danger, these are students who have already been erased from their classrooms, have been erased from history in their classrooms. So it's just doing that, taking that a further step. And one of the students, a young lady from the Cleveland School of Science and Medicine, she said, as a Black student in America, it is already hard enough to have my identity recognized and my history acknowledged, especially in the classroom. But these two bills would only make everything worse. So they're already feeling, they already know that, they know that their history has been whitewashed. And this is just going to make it even worse. And when you talk about just how their own self-worth, how students just feel about who they are, this is just telling them you don't matter. You don't matter. And that's really the danger of it. It's just further telling our students, continuing to tell our students, especially our students of color, that they don't matter. And it's not giving students who are not students of color, it's not giving them the opportunity to learn about each other. And just to read from one of the other students, a white student from Rocky River, he said, these legislators are pushing these bills to the status quo. So the status quo is preserved and the systemic racism in the United States continues to exist. So that's another danger, that systemic racism is going to continue to exist. And it's just going to get worse and worse when you have bills like this that have been developed.
Yes, thank you for that. I always love hearing from the students' voices. And I wonder if people actually see the long-term impact the way I see it. Because for many folks, they think that racism only impacts people of color, like Black people. Certainly they don't see the harm that it does to white folks and everyone else.
Right.
In my mind, it's like it actually dehumanizes us to act in such a way. So if the bills continue, what's the impact that it's going to have on the limited knowledge of even white folks? It distances them from their own humanity.
Yeah.
I kind of like sitting in the silence for a minute. I really do. Dr. Akbar, do you have anything to add about the importance of students and the dangers of this to students in particular?
Well, I think that Meryl's students that she just read their voices, I think that it says it for itself. But if I was to extend that, I just would say that there's tons of research out there that tells you that all students, regardless of racial background, benefit from having Black teachers, specifically Black male teachers. All students benefit from learning multiple histories and understanding America from different perspectives. So there's tons of research out there that shows that this is helpful for everyone. And in fact, as you look at equity, for example, and you provide a more equitable learning environment, what we found in tons of research also is that you see more students, not just students of color and those who are marginalized, but you see more students, even white students who were underperforming, starting to perform better. And so the narrative that we're being divisive and these teaching concepts are divisive is actually contrary to what we know based off what research tells us. Not only is it the right thing to do, but there's empirical reasons why we should do it. And those two things are never talked about. It's always about preserving the status quo in the way in which, and I have to say this too, the narrative that that's shared by the status quo on surface sounds good. Sounds like, why would you be against that? But that is also the way in which all propaganda against anything about justice or equality, equity, social justice, access, any of those things have been positioned. And so we need to be able to understand the nuance and to dive deeper beyond the surface, because I can make the most ugliest thing, I can make it look pretty by putting the prettiest box and the prettiest, most expensive bow on top of it. But it doesn't change what's inside the dang box.
Kind of like putting lipstick on a pig, huh?
Or perfume. Yeah.
Perfume. I hadn't heard
Yeah.
that one.
You put perfume on a skunk after it's been let out, it's still a skunk and you still smell it.
Yeah.
Those things. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's hear from another. I want you to hear from another student, a white student from Westlake. Here's what she said about it. She said, we should be able to learn the truth, accept that it happened, and do better. It is also important for K-12 students and teachers to talk about racism and sexism, both social and systemic constructs that exist today, and create an environment where kids can grow up to be accepting and understanding people. So I just think it's really important, as you said, for all students to get it, but these students are making it real clear.
We need that student to go to Kent State, I'm just saying.
Yes, you do.
I'm going to agree with that. Yes,
Yeah.
we do.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw this to you, Dr. Akbar. What do diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging? So and sometimes justice, right? There's a variety: diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, justice. What do they look like in practice? And how can we encourage folks to embrace those principles?
That's a great question. First, they all don't mean the same thing. And so you can have diversity without equity, you can have diversity without inclusion, and you can have all those things without having greater access or social justice, except for equity. So if you have true equity, then you're going to have social justice, because you're talking, equity is all about being intentional. It's about the examination of yourself, as well as the honoring people's lives, and also acknowledging harm that has been done, and to do whatever you can to repair that harm. That's equity. Social justice is along those same lines. It's more so just the ensuring that the community feels valued through the work that you're doing, the efforts that you're doing, so that everyone has a sense of any harms have been right, if there are any harms, and there's historic harms. Then you have inclusion, which is really I wish I had the image, but I don't. Inclusion is really, if you think about a dance, right? Inclusion isn't just where you invite everybody to dance, right? So it's where everyone gets to dance. And then equity, if you're thinking about the dance even further, is even those who may have different dancing abilities also get to dance without being challenged, without pointing and laughing. And even those who might be in a wheelchair, for example, also gets to participate in that dance. So you have what I would call a spectrum, where you are celebrating the mere counting or representation of multiple people, to the actual participation and repairing harm of historical past wrongdoings.
And diversity is everybody gets invited to the dance, but not necessarily gets to dance.
Well, diversity is more so just counting who's there.
Okay.
You didn't necessarily invite anybody, but you got diversity just by the fact that there's 15 women and there was 30 men originally.
Okay. So some may be crashing the dance. They're just there.
Yeah, they're just there. There's
Okay.
no real effort. When you have diversity, there's really not that many efforts to do anything different. The efforts come in inclusion and equity. And then I didn't even talk about belonging, but belonging is really about people feeling valued for being there, and that they're able to be whole, and they're able to be authentic, and their authentic selves are valued, that they don't have to assimilate or accommodate others in order to be valued, to be a valued part of whatever that is, the
They don't even
community
have
or
to
whatever.
dance, right? They don't even have to dance. They can just
Be there.
be there.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but they're valued all the same.
Right.
And
Right.
that's more of an intrinsic thing,
Mhm.
based off the way in which the climate that we cultivate for people.
Mhm.
That's wonderful. I've sat in a lot of trainings with Dr. Akbar, so I appreciate, and I knew he would educate us all on that one. And I do think it's important to distinguish the difference, because I know for myself, I've sat on a lot of committees and I've done a lot of board work in different areas, and we can talk about diversity, but that's not just bringing everybody, hey, come on, it's really the harder part is that inclusion and belonging, and really kind of recognizing that folks need to have it. I see CJ has her hand up, and honestly, I wouldn't stop for anybody but former State Senator CJ Prentice, but I am going to ask CJ to go ahead and ask her question, because I'm sure it's a good one.
Thank you. This is really wonderful.
Hey,
Can
CJ.
can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Okay.
you.
You guys are just blowing my mind. Wonderful. But the question has to do with the legislation. Where is it at this point? And what's the likelihood of it moving forward? So I guess, Merle, you're the one to know that, or maybe somebody else on the line.
I was going to say that's a Cynthia Peoples question, but from
Cynthia, where are you? Okay.
Cynthia, are you here?
Yeah, I'm looking right at her.
Cynthia needs
But
to
I
answer that
think
one.
that in the context of this educational, the reality is that this legislation may or may not be moving. I'm not sure, and maybe other people are just as ignorant as I am. So
Well,
can you
the
bring us up
fact
to
that
date?
it hasn't passed yet, passed out of committee, it's still in the state and local government committee. The fact that it hasn't passed out of committee is a good thing. It's been around since May of last year, and there has been so much opposition, so much advocacy against it through emails and phone calls, and students going to Columbus to speak, and parents. So the fact that it's still sitting in committee is a good thing. As far as what's going to happen, I really wouldn't be able to answer that. Cynthia is on the call. She maybe have more details, because she's the one that updates the wonderful website, honestyforohioeducation.info. So maybe Cynthia can offer some more information, but just, I get my information from Cynthia. And that's what I have been told, that because of so many people fighting against these bills, that they have not passed out of committee, and that's a good thing.
I'm happy to offer an update now, later, or submit it in. It's completely up to you, Dr. Levito.
Go ahead, I like this. Go ahead.
Sure. So as Merle said, the bill is still sitting in the House State and Local Government Committee. It has gone through 12 different revisions since it was introduced back in the committee back in May. We've only seen actually 3 of those revisions that have made it to the committee floor, where there's an opportunity for one of the co-sponsors to actually talk about the update. We've only been offered one opportunity, opponents of the bills, to go to the State House and actually offer testimony. And what the chair of the committee did was he merged the opponent, proponent, and interested party testimony into one hearing, and then only offered 3 hours for all of these parties to offer their testimony. And they offered it for both 322 and 327. 322 is a more narrow version of 327. And like Merle said, there were over 500 people across the state of Ohio that submitted opposition testimony to both of these bills, and nearly 100 people showed up at the State House that day to offer in-person opposition testimony. This was back in September. And each time that we have an indication that the bill is moving, people across the state rally. We get our testimony ready so that we can click send, because per the protocol of the committee right now, you are not allowed to send your testimony ahead of time. You actually have to wait until the committee announces that the hearing is scheduled. But we're ready. I mean, if you open any paper right now, you will read something about opposition to 327 or to 322. In fact, during this call, I was just looking up some pieces. There's a pretty scathing piece that was just dropped today about one of the co-sponsors, which I can drop the link into the chat about her comments about both siding the Holocaust. So yes, we are mobilizing around the state. There are a lot of different ways that people can take action around that, contacting your legislators, letters to the editor on the op-eds. Our local media are our best megaphones to get our points across very quickly across the entire state. There's student organizing that people can do. Merle is so wonderful about lifting the student voice, which they are the real truth tellers in all of this. They are on the receiving end of this harm. They are living through their own trauma. They are the ones that are in real time connecting the dots from what happened in the past to what is happening right now. They understand that through line. It doesn't matter what these legislators are trying to do in bills. They understand how our history connects to our present, and they are far advanced emotionally, intelligent wise than these legislators. And they don't want to stand for this. They're insulted, they're offended of what these legislators are trying to do. And we're behind them. I mean, we put the students first, and we're walking behind them, besides them. But as your three panelists have done brilliantly today, it's all about centering the student. And Michael Charney's on here too. Michael Charney is a huge student activist in his own right, and he's with the coalition as well. Yeah, and I'm happy to share some links in the chat where people can plug in and follow updates about the bill too. But final thing that I'll say is, even if the bill isn't moving in committee right now, what we really need to pay attention to is at the end of the General Assembly in what is called lame duck season, because this is where we see a lot of really nasty, toxic pieces of legislation that get greased through at the end of election season that normally wouldn't be able to get through the legislature. So we're really keeping an eye on what's going to happen at the end of the year.
Yeah. And I just wanted to mention, when students need to write, and as I wrote these letters, 10 of them wrote letters to the editor. And I just want to say, don't forget your community, those free community newspapers that you can pick them up in the grocery store and so forth. Don't forget those papers. I sent these 10 of the students' letters to 2 community newspapers. And one of the communities liked them so much, they said they wanted more. And so I was able to get 2 of the students actually hired to write articles, and they get $50 per article. So the community is really thirsty for students. They never get to hear from kids. So they're really thirsty for that. So don't forget those little free newspapers when you're encouraging young people to write about this issue.
Fantastic, fantastic. I do want to, and I did tell you that there would be authenticity in a visitor here. So she wants to, she's engaged by the conversation. RoLesia, I want to throw a question out to you about courageous conversations, because I think that's important to address before we get into our question and answers with folks. What are courageous conversations, and why should we engage in these discussions, even if they're uncomfortable? We've had some discussion about comfort this evening. What has your experience been with courageous conversations, and how does it transform personal and professional lives?
Yes. So my introduction to terminology courageous conversations came through when I attended a training with the National Equity Project in Oakland, California. And that term is actually coined by Glenn Singleton. And it builds on like the skill and the capacity to have an intergroup dialogue. It's talking about the stuff that we don't want to talk about in mixed company, especially when it comes to race, class, gender, intersectionalities. And it enables us to speak openly about biases and barriers that get in the way of student success. I went back and I didn't bring the book with me, but Glenn Singleton's second edition of Courageous Conversations specifically says, he defines it as it utilizes the agreements, conditions, and he created a tool called the Compass to engage, sustain, and deepen interracial dialogue about race in order to examine schooling and improve student achievement. And he says specifically, it engages those who won't talk. It sustains the conversation when it gets uncomfortable. And it also deepens the conversation to the point where authentic understanding and meaningful action occurs. So that's sort of the textbook side of it. My own experience, I'm a part of a community of practice, an equity-based group of colleagues from around the country, where we come together and we train facilitators to do equity work. And many of us believe that the way it starts is it starts with an individual, and I need to interrogate our own personal biases, our own values, and our own beliefs and our background, because that explains who we are when we come to the table or when we come to any conversation about race. And then we also believe that after you've done your own personal work, it's important to do racial affinity group work. So you can speak with people who have your shared experience. And you can talk amongst each other, and you can vent, and you can cry, and you can tell all the microaggressions and the trauma. But in that group, you also get support. And it's an opportunity for healing and some mentorship. And in that work, you actually build the muscle, so then you come back together and you can more effectively have the hard conversations across difference. So that's been my experience. And as of late, consulting with the San Francisco Coalition of Essential Small Schools enables groups to do small change cycles. Like after you've done your work personally and an affinity group, you agree on something you want to do to change your own practice. And you give yourself 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks to practice it, reflect on it, and then share publicly about your own growth and development. But it really, really is about coming to the table in a civil and humble way to really have the conversations that people are afraid to have publicly and across difference, for the purpose of being better educators for our students.
We were able to mention Courageous Conversations in our resolution. I just want to read, further resolved that the starting point of our work in racial equity must be reflection and internal examination, whereby the board will look for ways to engage our members in open and courageous conversations on racism and inequity. Unfortunately, that's not happening. But during the first 4 years, we had a better chance of that happening. But now we don't talk about that at all. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah, that sounds very unfortunate. The first thing is, in order to solve a problem, you have to acknowledge that one exists, right? You have to say that I have a problem. That's one thing. But before you even get to a problem, to even acknowledge a thing as a thing, you have to be able to claim it and name it. And so to not be able to have courageous conversations is also just restricting people's opportunities for actually being able to see a thing as a thing in some people's eyes. And the unfortunate part of it is, it's almost like there's a belief that we all walk around with our eyes wide closed, with our eyes closed, as if we don't see the things happening all around us and before us. But there's so many people in this world, especially those who want to restrict these conversations, or refuse to have courageous conversations. One, because it causes them a chance to be uncomfortable. And we live in a society where certain people have the privilege to not be uncomfortable whenever they want to not be uncomfortable. And those of us, who have to live in this skin and this experience and bears the historical lineage and generations of genealogy of the past harm, are the ones who really need to or should be shielded from this pain, but we have to continue to endure it. And so I just think that that's something else to consider, is that we really need to name everything that it is, and to be able to have those conversations in order for us to move past it. Pretending like it didn't exist doesn't help us move past at all. But so many people are caught up in their feelings and wanting us to acquiesce for their feelings because they believe, unfortunately, that because they individually, personally did not have any type of onus in how we arrived at the situation that we're in, that they deserve to be shielded from that conversation. And that's just not a fact that I live by. I think that we can't move past it. We can't repair harm if you don't even believe or want to talk about that harm even happened.
But I want to share something where that may come from. I just read an article called "What White Children Need to Know About Race," and it's by Ollie Michael and Eleonora Batoli. And this part really stood out for me. It says the research suggests that for fear of perpetuating racial misunderstandings, being seen as racist, making children feel badly, or simply not knowing what to say, many white parents tend to believe that there is never a right time to initiate a conversation, and I'm going to call it a courageous conversation, about race. They talk to their children about race if it becomes relevant in their lives, mostly in negative context. Otherwise, they tell their children that people are all the same and that they should not see race. While white parents' intention is to convey to their children the belief that race shouldn't matter, the message their children receive is that race, in fact, doesn't matter.
Wow.
I think I think that is so deep.
Yeah.
I just wanted to share that.
And
Fortunately, I represent 24 districts, and I always send these articles to the 24 superintendents who I represent. There's another article I read called "Teacher Expectations Reflect Racial Biases. John Hopkins study suggests." I just sent that article today, and I'll be sending this one about what white children need to know about race next week. But these are the kinds of things that especially I think our superintendents and our school districts need to read, just to make it possible for them to initiate some of those courageous conversations.
And and this may sound strange coming from me, but to some extent, I don't think some white people can help but to believe as they do. Because for those who live in insulated communities, they don't see it and don't experience it.
Right.
And I really believe that they come to a different understanding when they get out of their comfort zone and they actually engage with people of color, like go to spaces where you are actually the minority.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
When they start to either befriend or have relationships, authentic relationships with people of color, or just somebody different. It could be, are disabled, friends and stuff. And they see how people perceive them and how they engage with other people. When they are in it with others, then they begin to see it. But in the absence of other, I don't think that they can.
Case in point, I spoke to a group of 15 students at Lake Erie College, 14 white students, 1 Black student. And I showed them this wonderful video that's on YouTube called "Systemic Racism Explained." It's about 5 minutes long, and it's really well done. And at the end of the class, I had the students talk about systemic racism and they were amazed that they didn't know it. They didn't know any of that. But one young lady waited behind class, waited after the class had left. And she said to me, she said, I grew up in a small white neighborhood. She said, I never knew any of this existed. So I just wanted to mention that because of what you just said.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it's doing students a disservice. Because if you actually, once they graduate or go to college and then they're around all these other people, they actually don't know how to act. You know, they're
Right.
like social misfits.
They rely on the stereotypes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I'm going to slightly disagree with you on that, because what I'm finding is that our younger people are 10 times ahead of their parents and grandparents.
I agree with that.
And that
I agree with that too.
are growing up in a world where they honor each other and respect each other. Now, of course, there's still bullying, because that's what happens when you're young. And I'm not trying to negate racial bullying at all, but in my time, I'll just go back to, even when I was a student, which, I graduated high school 20 years ago. So it sounds like a long time, but it's really not that long ago. And some of the things that we're talking about, some of the things that our students today come to the table with, those perspectives, though many people of my age did not have. And so now these are the parents of the young people, and their parents are in many cases still parenting younger people or grandparents. And so that's the challenge I think we have, is that we're having older individuals with older mindsets are the ones in charge of making these laws, that the individuals that it will impact the most, they have a totally different perspective. I'll give you one other thing. Even thinking about work, and I know this isn't about race, but this is about work. One of my students said to me when I asked, okay, what are you haven't declared a major yet. What are you going to declare your major? And they were like, I don't know. And I said, well, what do you want to do? Like, what type of job do you dream of doing? And his response was, I don't dream of labor. And I thought that was profound, because we were taught all to think about what would be the dream job that we would have. How would we be, commoditize ourselves, or what we're doing? How do we make money to provide for our families? And what he brought me to think is they're thinking more entrepreneurial. One of the things he said was, I want to solve a problem. I just don't know exactly how to do it or how to attack it. And so what I believe is we're going to get more young people who are thinking about problems they want to solve, not jobs they want to have.
And I agree with you. And I believe that because our legislators are of a different generation, don't forget that that's who was actually teaching our children, not the legislators, but the educators are pretty much middle class and white females that are largely in classrooms teaching children of that same age group.
Yep, good point.
That's just the reality, you know, and unfortunately, I think that's what causes this notion of social reproduction, right? Generations go, you got the lawmakers and the teachers, so it's really reproducing the family the cycle or the status in society. And it's really a challenge to break that cycle, especially for minoritized communities. To break that cycle of poverty takes some years.
And the sad part is, and we probably don't want to go here, but I'm going to go here anyway, because I wouldn't be me if I didn't. But the sad part is some minoritized people have assimilated to that mindset, and are individuals who are sought upon to bring added credibility to this normative mindset and perspective, and this belief that the American dream is meritocratic when it's not. None of this is based off how hard you work. So there's a few of us who are anomalies to that story and have worked hard and achieved, but mostly it's in spite of, not because of, right? And
Indeed.
so I just want to make sure I say that too, because that's why I think that we have challenges with institutionalizing equity is, one, we seek credibility. It can't be credible unless a white person stamps it, gives their stamp of approval. But our mere existence is credibility. So I just wanted to make sure I said that.
Agreed. Ooh. Yeah.
I mean, the president of our school board is African American, and she voted against the anti-racism resolution, and she voted to rescind it.
Well, you brought the name up, not me, but that's
I didn't mention any names. I just think I was only saying that because of the points you just made. So I just think, this is an example of what you just said.
Yeah. And there's a history of being against things that are going to help us anyway. And I think that's the problem too. And sometimes people question or have issues with us because we criticize individuals that have been given credibility by the status quo, right? And because we question or criticize the veracity or the fidelity of which they've held beliefs and actions that have hindered our progress, then we are the problem. And I think that that's the challenge that we have, just to add a layer to this as Black educators and leaders and thought leaders, when we're in these spaces, raising issues and hopefully shining a light on what's happening, we get labeled as the rebel rousers and the troublemakers.
Yeah.
But when all in actuality we're doing is shining a light on the persistent and pervasive problem that has existed, and that rebel rousing label is really a distraction so that the light dims and that no one looks and sees where the light is pointing.
Jessica, are we going to have other participants who are on the webinar? No. Okay.
Well, no, yeah, we will, but we're going to get to that, Michael. But since you're talking, if you would like to add something, I know 8:10 to 8. Actually, I want to take questions briefly for about 10 minutes, and then I want to give the panelists an opportunity to kind of give a last word. So till about 8:25. So go ahead.
Yeah, I want to announce a very exciting development in honesty in education. But first, I want to say to Meryl 3,310. I think she'll get that.
I get it.
Honesty in Education has hired a statewide youth organizer, building on the work that Merle has done with the students. The idea of this youth organizer is help produce an interracial student movement to have students have their voices heard about honesty in education, not only to attack these two horrible bills, but also to ask themselves the question, what is honesty in education in the classroom, in the school, in the district? So we can build on this really unique moment in American history, where the thousands of protests against the murder of George Floyd both created a deeper understanding of structural racism and the need to fight against it in all aspects of our society, but it also created an incredible backlash, which is rooted in a level of foolish grievance that white people are now the people who are being discriminated against. And so I hope, especially as I see Ashtabula and Akron, that we're in the process now of identifying teachers and students that can come together to listen, to communicate, and to figure out how best their voices can be heard. And part of it is going to be based on the whole idea of both empathy, solidarity, and activism, so that students can really have their voices heard. And we will hopefully be in a situation in a few months where the Republicans will realize their attempt to use this foolish way of classifying critical race theory is an electoral loser, because they're only doing it in order to win elections, thinking that they could get more votes by lying to the people. And I think that students are well positioned to change the narrative. And that's why this coalition with the Ashtabula NAACP and the League of Women Voters is so exciting, because this type of thing is happening all over the state, all over the country. And so you can get in touch with Cynthia to figure out how to identify these students, how to activate them, how to get adults who know students, because I think this can really move us into a powerful position, and not only, as Scott Demaro of the OEA says, not only playing defensive, but begin to play offensive. So thanks, Jessica, for the short time, but I wanted to announce that exciting development to have someone full-time organizing high school students
Nice.
around the state. That's it.
Thank you,
Though
Michael.
I think something act from the late 1960s by the Black Panther Party describes our situation, and that's seize the time. This is the time to be seized by all of us to have a real pushback and an offensive to transform the political atmosphere. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Jessica.
Sure. Do you have a question, Tim?
Yeah, so I know initially you asked me to be on the panel, and I wasn't sure if I could commit, but I want to say this because this is very important that I would say this, and I hope that some of the people or all the people in the group would understand this fundamental thing I'm going to say. When I hear students, right, I think about family value, right? And what I mean by that is, when I think about me being a student from kindergarten, right, this is what I'm taught. A kid is seen and not heard. That's the way I'm raised. Then I'm taught a teacher is in a position where we should be able to trust that educator. Whatever they say is almost gospel. So I go into a classroom, I'm told to be seen and not heard, so I can't even formulate a question. I don't even know how to ask for help because I'm raised to respect adults. And then because I don't know how to ask questions, when I try to ask a question, then I'm laughed at because I'm in school, kindergarten, first grade, I'm trying to learn how to ask because I wasn't raised to do that. And then when you have, and these are the fundamentals of a student voice. So when you have a teacher saying that, hey, Tim has bad behavior, Tim is not a good reader, and then she shares that with my mother. My mother begins to develop a perception of my educational ability. So then it becomes a weapon toward me. So the teacher says, Tim is bad or Tim doesn't read well. So as soon as my mom's having a bad day, she reminds me of what the teacher told me. Yep, your teacher said you're bad. Just like your teacher said, just like your teacher said, just like your teacher said. So when I hear the students, I think about it being raised plays a part in that. And so I try to tell parents now, you shouldn't really tell your kids you should be seen and not heard. And then the kid they're not able to tell you along the educational journey when they feel discriminated against, when a teacher is not treating them fairly because they feel like they're not able to. So when we talk about these things, further ahead in the future, but really the fundamental thing is, can that child talk when they're little, because adults play a big role. You don't talk back to an adult. In some of the Black cultures, I don't know if they continue to do that, but that's the culture I grew up in. So when I was in school, I wanted to ask questions, but I didn't know how to talk to an adult because my mom didn't allow me to do that. So if we have those kind of households, how do we grab that early enough so kids can begin to use their voice and to challenge ideologies and the things being taught in the classroom?
Does anybody on the panel want to try to help Mr. Fleming? Especially working with families and teachers that might be or potentially be listening.
Well, I think he gave a great perspective. My biggest thing around parent engagement, that's what I focused my dissertation on. And RoLesia mentioned Karen Mapp's work around funds of knowledge. And she has a lot of work around parent engagement and schools. And so I that's kind of where I go. And I'm thinking about, who has knowledge and who do we see as being knowledgeable, right? And if we see our families as being knowledgeable and having knowledge and being holders of knowledge, and that the school and or teacher isn't the sole knowledge holder, then you can have some great synergy and fireworks and explosion of learning if you're working together. And if you aren't, in a situation where you see your students as something that you have to distrust or you hold some sort of disdain for them. I think that's where everything happens. The last thing I'll say is a lot of times, and I'll go back to parent engagement and involvement, a lot of times we also want our parents, specifically our Black and Latinx parents, to be engage in our schools just the way the research says parent involvement is supposed to be seen. Volunteering for field trips, chaperoning in schools, and those helping with homework. And parent engagement may not look like that in all families, and that doesn't make it bad or wrong. And I think that at least from my research, what it shows is that we, Black males, specifically their parents, were engaged in many different other ways, but may not have been seen as being engaged or involved in the traditional sense. And so I think that we just need to be open to who has knowledge and being able to build a partnership where everyone participates in and has a role.
It's about developing a trust with that parent.
Mm-hmm.
And when you say relationships, partnerships, that's what it's about. If the parent knows that you mean well for their child, they will trust that you're going to do well for the child. And so if the child has been raised in a home where he or she was told to be seen and not heard, if you have a relationship with that parent, then you can talk about why it's important for me to hear your child's voice. I want to know what's on his mind or her mind. That's how I can get to know your child. And the better I know your child and the better your child knows me, then we can have a real healthy environment in the classroom. So it's about developing that relationship with the parent so that you have a mutual trust.
And for me, it goes back to what's the purpose of education? And typically I go to two schools of thought. Oftentimes in American education, the purpose a couple of decades ago was to simply reproduce the same family status. And so those who were skilled laborers, the kids grew up to be skilled laborers. And those who were in academia and higher education, that's the route they went. So is the purpose of education to liberate, to empower, or is it for control and compliance? And I don't think people actually use the language, but I actually believe that it is about control and compliance for some children. And for other children, it's preparing them to take over family businesses. It is for creating to be entrepreneurs. And so my goal has always been to help liberate a child, to educate them, get them the knowledge and the skill so they can pursue their lifelong dreams and not be a barrier to them. So I think it depends on what the question is. What is the purpose of education for you? And we're stuck. People of color, I think parents sought to keep their children protected, right? And out of the jail cell. So that means you had to carry yourself a certain way, right? You had to be quiet to some extent. Couldn't roll up in there, just being you and asking questions, because people consider that a threat for lots of, especially Black males. And Dr. Akbar, you can speak to this, So I think it's a complex issue, but it always begs the question, for what reason are you educating children?
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I wanted to open to more questions, but it's 8:25. And for the sake of time, I do want to take a moment, give each one of you individually an opportunity to give us some last words, some encouragements. One of the things that I didn't get to, but Cynthia did give us is, how can members of our organizations and communities work to protect this? So what can we do, and allow you to give your last words and thank you. I should probably, so let's, RoLesia, can we start with you? Look at you waving. Yes, thank you.
I'll be kind of quick. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, Jess. I believe you rock, right? And we appreciate you all continuing to engage yourselves in this work. I just want to go back and think that I've used a language that, uses, Black folks and white folks, and because I'm comfortable using that language, but I don't want you to think that that's divisive from me. I see the majority of the people on this call as white folks. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because I'm hoping that you want to be in solidarity for honesty and education so that we can teach for liberation. And I can say that I know Jessica is a white ally. I don't know many other people on here, but she's an ally, because she defers to what's the right thing for children. So my ask is that other white folks, build your muscle to be in alliance with marginalized communities, because not only does it uplift marginalized communities, but it also connects you to your own humanity. So there's a level of solidarity that I think needs to be in place if we're going to make the impact that we want to make. So stay in the fight. I appreciate you, and I look forward to continuing to grow this movement. So thank you for your time.
I just have to lift up students' voice again. One thing we didn't talk about, which is a part of this whole movement to be dishonest, is the book banning. And I think it's really important for us to make sure that students are involved in this fight. And as far as I'm concerned, it is a fight. One of the things that I did with the Speak group is we actually had a Speaks Ban Book Freedom Club. Freedom was spelled F-R-E-A-D-O-M. And we had a white student who chose to read The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. And he had some words that I want to share with you when you talk about just making sure that students are at the forefront, because they're the ones this is about. And so this is what the young man said about what he learned from The Bluest Eye. He said, be comfortable with your own self, no matter what society tells you to do, what your family tells you to do, just be true to who you are. And I think those are wise words coming from that young man. And that's something that I think that we should encourage for all students. And I'm going to end on that.
I think everyone said some great things. I want to thank Jessica for in the invitation. I just want to leave everyone with a few things. I am an educator, so I can't leave here without a bit of education. And I want to say that it's important to me that we understand as we continue to do this work that we sometimes can give license to individuals to create detours, and I want us to feel empowered to not give people a license, and our silence is a license for those detours. And so one of the biggest detours to what we're asking for, which is equity and justice, is this thought that we have to pay for those who have privilege to get on board. But what really I want to ask you is, how long should we wait, and how slow should we go in order to get what is long overdue for hundreds of years for individuals who have bear the brunt of negative and bad decision-making for generations. It is perverse, as it said in the one TED Talk around this need to have comfort all the time. And I just want to say that. And the last thing I'll say is another dangerous thing that we want to avoid is this need to have groupthink and to start another committee and support the committee work that has been done for generations and years around how we repair the harm. It's really time for action. And you as an individual, we all collectively, especially with Cynthia Peoples and her work with Honesty for Education, we can continue to raise the clarion call for action, and action should happen now, not later. And I just wanted to say that and say equity is not groupthink. We'll never all agree on the path forward. And as long as we're centering the voices and needs of those who have been on the margins and lived in the periphery for generations, we will overcome and we will reach the place that we need to. And so this is hard work. So take care of yourself. It's time to innovate for wellness. And this wellness has to happen for all of us because there's so many of us who are not well because our society has made it so. Thank you again.
Well said.
Yeah, I don't even want to follow that. I just want to say thank you for each one of you for empowering me, empowering the group, for sharing your wisdom, your expertise, your experience, your truth. I appreciate each and every one of you. I appreciate the folks that joined us on the call. I'm so grateful for Cynthia Peoples and not just taking over as co-host and letting folks into the room, but for all of the work that she is doing with Honesty in Ohio Education. And I encourage, I know the link was dropped there, but I encourage you, if you're not on that listserv, to get on that listserv, because the action items every Tuesday, I can count on that email every Tuesday. And I know what's happening, I know where it's happening, and I feel informed. And so now is the time for action. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you very much. Thank you.